This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And happy 4th of July. Welcome to Libertarian Counterpoint. With me is the venerable Mr. Richard Fields. And Richard, we had some interesting experiences today. I mean, this last week or so, right? They had this first presidential debate. Disaster. It's just.
Well, I don't know how interesting it was. It was predictable. And I have something to say about it.
Yes, you do, Richard. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what you've got this week?
With this week's report from the fields, it has been abundantly clear for over a year, hey, that rhymes, that Joe Biden suffers from dementia. Really? And that it is rapidly getting worse. It also is completely obvious that the New York Times, the Washington Post, along with the major broadcast and cable TV networks, have been purposely running cover for Biden's senility, calling it all right-wing propaganda. All of these media outlets are mouthpieces for the self-appointed elites who control the federal government's executive branch and the majority of its legislative branch. But government-controlled media can't quite hide everything yet. There are still enough independent and financial media outlets with cameras and mics. They've recorded enough Joe Biden faux pas to convince me over a year ago that the odds were that Joe Biden would not be the Democratic candidate for president this year. The debate proved beyond any reasonable doubt that Joe Biden's dementia is getting really obvious. Democratic Party kingmakers are now discussing multiple scenarios to replace Biden at the top of the ticket. All those government mouthpiece media outlets mentioned above are dutifully calling for Biden to withdraw from the race. Biden's loss of the debate is not the result of his command of the issues. Both Trump and Biden lied incessantly about the cause and importance of federal deficits, about taxes, about immigration and border control, about the war in Ukraine, about the trespassing by Trump supporters of the halls of Congress on January 6th, and about each other's crimes. Biden lost the debate because TV is a visual medium. And as Marshall McLuhan explained in The Media is the Message, in TV, video is what counts. We saw an hour-and-a-half video of Biden unable to finish sentences, staring blankly into space while Trump was talking, stuttering, and otherwise making himself look, well, demented. That image won't go away in the minds of voters, no matter how much the media has to tries to explain it or turn the focus back on Trump. Trump, on the other hand, told his usual lies with conviction and wit. He was a much more convincing liar. It's easy to see why both Democrats and Republicans conspired again this year to keep all other candidates off the stage. The well-spoken, photogenic, and 38-year-old young libertarian Chase Oliver would have made mincemeat out of both Trump and Biden. Even the one-note symphony vaccine hater, RFK, would have appeared to be a lot more reasonable than the octogenarian clowns Democrats and Republicans have presented us with. Unfortunately, the names being floated by the Democrats to replace Biden, Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris, and even Hillary Clinton, are just as bad and in some ways worse on policy than Biden. That's this week's report from the fields. I'm Richard Fields. See you again next week.
Yeah, it's, I didn't bother, in full disclosure, I didn't bother to watch the debates. Because
I watched it so you wouldn't have to.
Yeah, I didn't see the point. I was working. I think we'll blame the fact that I was working that night, even though I think technically I was working because I chose to, not because I had to.
I have to admit, I tuned out the last half hour of the debate because I had more important things to do. There was a blackjack game going on.
Hey, there you go. Well, then between you and my son, he caught the last 20, 25 minutes of it, he said. So between the two of you, you guys got the whole thing. So there you go. You missed the golfing argument, I suppose.
I'm sorry I missed that. That must have been just awfully enlightening.
It may have been the most entertaining part of the whole debate. But we're gonna go skip into some of these things because I can't really believe Politico is blaming Trump for Biden's disaster.
Well, yeah, okay.
They're saying it's Trump's fault. Trump was on the attack. He was, he didn't answer questions directly. And well, yeah, that happens with every debate. So essentially they're mad because Trump was behaving like people do at debates.
Yeah. No.
And
okay.
And Biden was completely lost, apparently, because I've only seen.
Yeah, obviously was lost. And I mean, what we're seeing here is the media can't cover for him anymore. It's become blatantly obvious. I think the whole idea of a June debate, as opposed to a debate later in the season, this is the earliest there has ever been a debate in the presidential sweepstakes. I think they wanted an early debate just because they were hoping against hope that Biden would not have progressed into senility as far as he obviously has. That hope went up in smoke last week.
Yeah, I think their hopes and dreams are being dashed, even though, quite frankly, if Biden is your hope and dream, I think you've got some reimagining of your future.
Well, let's face it. I mean, for his entire presidency, it hasn't been the Biden presidency. It's been the staff, who are mostly Obama holdovers. Those are the people who are running the presidency. I mean, there's a movie, I forget the name of it, about somebody dead and being propped up so the party goes on. That's kind of what's been going on.
Yes, Weekend at Bernie's, and so Weekend at Biden's is the kind of the current theme to that. All right, but there is some good news, Richard, coming out of Washington, D.C. Surprisingly, some good news. The Supreme Court has struck down the Chevron deference. A lot of people have been calling it Chevron defense. No, it's a Chevron deference. And curtailing the power of federal agencies to essentially create policy all on their own. This is the Chevron doctrine. It's been something that public interest law firms, including my old the people I used to work for, Pacific Legal Foundation, have been going after it for decades. Well, for 40 years since it first appeared on the scene. And what the Chevron deference does is it says, in effect, that Congress can make a law saying, okay, we want to do good things about, name something, the environment, health, whatever. But we don't want to think too much about it or come up with the actual way to make that happen. We just want to be able to say that we put our name and we voted for a bill to do good things. And it showed up with, in spades with the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, is supposed to keep the water clean and the air clean and stop pollution. Oh, those are good things, right? But they don't want to say how, because then the devil's in the details, because there's always trade-offs. If you do one thing, it's going to have a negative trade. If you do one positive thing, it's going to have a negative trade-off elsewhere. And so they delegate the power to legislate. That's what they're doing. They're delegating the power to legislate to agencies. They call it rulemaking, but in effect, the rulemaking that goes on at all of these federal three-letter agencies is legislating. So the agency not only has the power to legislate, they have their own judicial tribunals. So if somebody who is under those regulations doesn't much like the regulation and wants to fight it in court, I'm going to take it to the Supreme Court. Well, they can't, because they have to take it first to the federal agency with their own tribunal, their own internal justice system. So the people that are writing the laws, the agency, in effect, is also judging the law with their own set of judges. And they're saying, well, the law that we wrote is perfectly fine, perfectly constitutional. You're out of luck. And the Supreme Court, because of the deference it gives to the so-called experts at the agencies, says, well, we're not going to touch that because we have to defer to the myth
that agencies know what the hell they're doing. In some cases, sometimes they do, but in many cases they just don't. Or what they are doing, they're ignoring the trade-offs. They might be getting a marginal environmental or health or whatever benefit, but the trade-off in economic terms or elsewhere in civilization is way more expensive than the small benefit that they're providing. Now, with Chevron deference ended, the Supreme Court, the appellate courts, obviously trial courts and then appellate courts and so on, and eventually the Supreme Court can rule and say, you know what, EPA, you know what, FDA, you know what, FCC, whoever it is, they can say, you went way too far. This does not pass constitutional measure. And so what we have now is we've gone back to 3 co-equal branches of government. Now, as I've said in previous comments, the executive branch is largely subsumed in the what we call the deep state. And by the deep state, I mean the deep state, the administrative state, and the shallow state, which is the moving back and forth between regulatory agencies and the businesses they regulate. So the executive branch is pretty well under the control of the elites. Not a whole lot that we can do about it in the short run. The legislative branch is largely under the control of the elites in the same manner, because they fund the campaigns, and there's only one primary aim for most legislators, and that's to get reelected. It's not to do good things; it's to get reelected because they want to stay on the gravy train. So the only independent branch left, and now really independent, is the judiciary, as long as they have tenure. They can stay around for a whole lot longer than the term of a president or the term of a legislator. So now we do have a co-equal and very powerful branch of government in the judiciary, and that's really the way it should be, kind of the way the founders expected it to be.
Yeah. So you were talking about some of the other curbing of the powers, the administrative powers, essentially. Yeah, we examined ourselves and we're fine. And yeah, you're guilty because we say so. This is essentially what has happened. And well, the Supreme Court has also dealt a curb to that. The SEC was trying to, had this internal court, then, here's your fine and you don't get to say anything about it. You don't get to appeal it. You don't get to, we've determined you're guilty. You have no defense, and here's your fine. Is essentially what the SEC was doing.
Yeah.
And so now because of that, the Supreme Court has decided that they can no longer impose those kind of monetary penalties in special in-house tribunals unless it was specifically authorized by the legislation. They can still do it. It's just they have to have a specific authorization to do so from Congress, unlike where they've done it. They've just kind of decided, this is how we're going to do things.
I mean, what it basically boils down to is it's telling legislators who like nothing better than to put their name on a do good things bill, with written on purpose very vaguely, so they can blame the agency for, it's not our, we didn't mean that for that to happen. It's because of the regulators. Republicans are particularly guilty of that. Now the legislature have to actually legislate. They have to actually figure out what the trade-offs are between, say, property rights and environmental protection. And they're all over the place, the kinds of trade-offs that have to be made. And quite often the trade-offs are much more expensive than the marginal gain in environment or health or what have you.
Yeah, well, and as we know, oftentimes what happens is that activists get into these roles, and now you're not actually doing things because of it's good for the community. It's because these activists have now, this is what they want. This is what they want to force the culture, the communities, to the direction they want those communities to go. And so they're going to force it through the will of the bureaucracy rather than the will of the voters, will of the locals, will of, whichever people who should be making these decisions. Now we're going to make those in the hollowed halls of the bureaucrats.
Yeah. I mean, you have a situation where people who have sociopathic tendencies, people who feel like they know, elitists, people who feel like they have some sort of special knowledge about how the world should run, and their way is the correct way, and the hoi polloi, the peasants really don't have a clue. They are the ones who gravitate first to politics, but even more so to administrative bureaucratic positions, because there they have civil service protection. They're there for as long as they want to be, and they can make their little rule, go through their rule making procedures. And up until now, there has been very little pushback against whatever the bureaucrats decide they want to do. So it attracts the Karens and the people who think, hey, the way I want to do it is the right way, and by God, I'm going to force everybody to do it the right way, whether they want to or not. It's prime territory for the people who want to force other people to do whatever they want, whether they want to or not.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because that brings us to the EU, who want to control the laws they want you to be able to scan your encrypted messages. Well, which kind of defeats the point of encrypted messages. The EU has a law now that would allow the scanning of encrypted messages.
How do you scan an encrypted message? I don't understand that. I mean,
that means you have to scan it before or after it's been decrypted. It's either before it's been encrypted or after it's been decrypted, which means that when you type something into Facebook Messenger, before they send it and have it encrypted, they have to be able to either give the government the key so they can decrypt it, or keep a copy and send it off to the government when they want.
Yeah, well, and it's to protect the children, right? To protect the children.
Yeah, who knows? It's it's the EU. Who knows what excuse they've given up? Probably the children, I would just suspect.
Yeah, if I read the article right, they're trying to protect the children from nasty things. And that's always the excuse for overreaching bills that basically ignore the civil rights of the people. They're always trying to, we're not worried about the adults, but, children get their hands on this. Oh, my, oh, my, oh, my.
Yeah. And that brings up so many disturbing questions, right? So we're going to give them all this data, all this access to protect the children. But when are we going to protect the children from them? Because
if you think about it, Europe is about, I don't know, maybe a decade or so ahead of the U.S. in their nanny state policies, whether it comes to the green movement, whether it comes to encrypting or censoring or controlling the internet, social media sites, and so on. The EU has always been just a little bit ahead of the U.S., or like California is ahead of the rest of the country in nanny statism. But politically, they're running into some problems with that. The Conservatives just won in France over the weekend, and there's a whole lot of people, farmers in particular, who are saying, "No more. We're done with all of this hyper regulation." So there may be a wind of change in Europe as well. We can hope so.
Well, we've seen it. Maybe the Javier Milei down in Argentina, I think they got to below zero inflation finally.
Yeah, they did.
And, now everybody's going to complain that they're in a recession, right? Because they got to zero inflation.
Well, there's no way in hell. I mean, they were in a recession before, there's no way that you can stop 200% inflation or whatever it was. You can't stop that kind of thing without causing some pain among the people who were getting the free money. And that's what was happening. The Central Bank of Argentina was printing up free money and giving it to bureaucrats and other wards of the state in one way or another. And that's, if you cut off that money, they're going to have to actually, have a period of time when they're not doing very well while they're looking for a real job. We hope they find one.
Yeah. We hope that all his other reforms go through so the economy can be robust and those people can be absorbed into the real economy. I think that is the best hope for Argentina in the future. And so, talk about lack of hope in the future. It doesn't surprise me, Richard, that those who complain about banned books the most are the ones who are putting pressure on people who sell books to actually ban books.
Yeah, no, it's the people who want to save democracy that are destroying democracy by by blatantly going after the First Amendment. The Biden administration from day one trying to stop Amazon from selling books that were critical of their COVID narrative. It was the Biden administration who was out to save democracy, who from day one got on the phone or got on email or through other channels called in the social media executives from Facebook, from Twitter, from LinkedIn, et cetera. Call them on the carpet, call them to the White House, sat them down and said, in effect, that's a nice media operation, a nice social media operation you got there, Guido. You want to keep it? You better toe the line. And that's what's going on. Is pure and simple extortion to make sure that the Hunter laptop story never gets the light of day, or any other narrative that they think is correct, which in many cases simply isn't.
Yeah, whatever narrative needs to be pushed or whatever narrative wants to be hushed up, the social media companies could do it to a large extent, right?
Yeah, well, they can do it, and if they don't, they lose Section 230. They lose their huge money making opportunity. I mean, the social media companies mint money.
And many of these have contracts with the federal government, right?
Yeah, and if you lose your contract with the federal government, forget about it. And the Supreme Court this week, in many other decisions, they punted on that one, right? That Missouri.
Said, the people who sued don't have standing, so they didn't even decide on the case. They just said you just don't have standing, so we don't have to make a decision. Yeah,
well, at least they didn't say that the government can. They didn't endorse the blatant censorship that was going on. That's the silver lining. I suspect that somebody will figure out a way to make sure they have standing and bring that case again. I sure hope so, and I sure hope the Supreme Court has the same kind of gonads they had with Chevron and say this is blatantly First Amendment unconstitutional.
Yeah, so now you have to go figure out, okay, how do we make sure someone who has standing, how do you do that? Someone who is running for office, or is that something you have?
Well, there's a number of ways to get standing. You just have to prove that you were harmed by the censorship that was going on. And it's going to get even worse now. We're in the final months of a presidential campaign, and you can be absolutely sure that with the Supreme Court's go-ahead, the Biden administration will be going full guns to censor anything that goes through social media channels.
Yeah. So we've been talking about the administrative state and kind of its arbitrariness. There's another one John wanted us to talk about today, and that was the FDA is blatantly and arbitrarily approves menthol pipes, right? They've been dragging their feet on approving vapes for menthol-flavored vapes and these kind of things.
Well, you have to ask yourself, who smokes menthol cigarettes? Who do you think will probably want to use menthol vapes? Now, it's the black population, and the Biden administration can't afford to lose any black votes. They know that. And the other part of it is simply the science. The science is that on balance, I'm not a vapor, I'm not a smoker, but on balance, it's a lot safer to vape than it is to smoke. You're not bringing tar into your lungs. It's relatively benign, relatively. I mean, I'm not saying it's harmless, but it's relatively benign compared to actual smoking. And so the FDA should say yes to whatever kind of vape products the companies want to put out there. But for some reason or another, it might have something to do with the 2024 election. The one they're focusing on is menthol.
Yeah, they're trying a number of things to kind of buy some votes, aren't they? This Biden administration.
Well, the part, letting Assange go free. That's got to be politically motivated.
Yeah, so let's get an issue out of the. We'll just make it a non-issue. Yeah. Which, if you're a journalist, it shouldn't make you happy because he still had to plead guilty.
Yeah, had to plead guilty to a bogus charge, and he gets to go back to Australia. He better not. He daren't set foot in the U.S. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, and it's.
And meanwhile, Snowden is still, a man without a country in Russia.
Yeah, it's sad that we have these kind of political. I don't know. I don't even know what the word to use is, Richard, to be honest.
I think
It's
the
kind of
word
political game that
I
we're
think the
playing.
word is tyranny.
It's so arbitrary. Is really
right.
it's why today? No, it's not that you're wrong. It's just so arbitrary. Why this week rather than 6 months ago? Why
Mm.
why were they so willing to all of a sudden make a deal rather
Yeah.
than 3-6 a year ago? Is it now they hit the 62 months that we wanted to give them in prison anyway, so it's fine? That doesn't make any sense.
No.
All right, so another article here sent in by John as we get the time to get out of here. We've got a new study has shown that safe supply can decrease the overdose deaths by up to 61%, which makes a lot of sense, at least intellectually, right? On the
we're talking about opiates, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
So hard drugs, the heroin, the opium, the fentanyl, probably morphine, all of the drugs that your mama said don't ever mess with them because you'll be addicted for life and you'll die. Well, if you get a safe supply, you'll probably survive. Now, again, no endorsement for taking those kinds of mind-altering drugs because they'll make you probably, worthless in a lot of other ways. But better stay alive with safe sources than die with not so safe sources.
Yeah, you. It's just like we have liquor stores full of poison, literally poison.
Yeah.
But because
my favorite poison.
They're because we know they're brands and we have we have some trust in it. It's people die every day from it, but there's a lot less than were dying when the government was poisoning it because they didn't want us drinking liquor back in Prohibition.
Yeah.
It's these things kind of solve themselves, and it was opioids and stimulants. So if you're taking opioids or stimulants, it's the study says it's safer if you have a safe supply, which just makes any kind of rational common sense. Right?
Common sense,
If you don't have to go walk through a ghetto to find the guy on the street corner selling the drugs.
We can decry big pharma as much as we want, but big pharma is not going to try to kill their customers or do it inadvertently. Whereas the guy that's making meth in the backwoods in a bathtub, he probably doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and doesn't care if he kills his customers.
No, he's cared about his quick paycheck. Big Pharma wants a long big paycheck. They're in the long game. And we are out of time this week. Richard, thank you for being here. We want to thank you for watching. And
Thank
so
you.
please remember, everybody, have a good night and love everyone.
This is Dale Morgan thanking you for watching the Libertarian Counterpoint each Thursday at 8 p.m. Channel 17 on Comcast, on YouTube, and on Facebook. We invite you to come again next week